Hello and welcome to this film about Harvard referencing, your step-by-step guide. Okay, let's get to grips with how to do Harvard referencing properly. So you might have come across your professors or teachers telling you about you need to have in-text citations. Well, in-text citations, along with a list of references, usually at the end of your work, are two essential components of academic writing. They work together to show the sources of information that you've used to add value to your work. And importantly, they avoid anybody criticizing you for cheating through what's called plagiarism. That means taking work that belongs to other people and trying to pass it off as your work. So, what are in-text citations? These are really kind of like brief signposts within the main body of your writing. They show where you've used information that belongs to somebody else from another source. So they guide, like a signpost, like a road signpost or something you see in the street. The in-text citations help the reader find the full source details in your list of references at the end of your writing. So they give credit, these in-text citations give credit to the original author or creator of that information that you've used in your work. They support your arguments with evidence from important, valuable, and credible sources, assuming you've used those, and allow your readers to find those original sources if they want to go and read those original reports or articles or websites that you've used in your work. But there's a specific format you have to put these things, and this typically includes the author's last name and the year of publication in parentheses, but it also might include page numbers for things like direct quotes that you've used. Where you use the information, you need to put these in-text citations immediately after that information that you've used or you've cited. Whether it's a direct quote, paraphrase, or a summary, or data, or a chart, or a picture, put that in-text citation immediately after you've used that. Now, onto the reference list. So this is a comprehensive, detailed, and rich list at the end of your document that provides full bibliographic details for every source of information that you've cited and used and relied upon in your writing. And a reference list has these purposes. Really, firstly, it allows readers to easily find the sources that you've used. So if they want to go and check where you've got your sources, what those sources contain, and to check that you've used them correctly, they can do that. So it provides complete information for each and every source that you've used, including things like the author's name, the title of the publication, when it was published, and who published it. For example, was it on a website? Or in a journal or in a textbook. If it's on a website, you would put the URL, the address included in your list of references. It also demonstrates the breadth of your research and the sources you've consulted, how much work you've put in to finding this really useful, relevant, valuable information that you've put into your work. So remember, the format of how you put that information in your reference list depends upon what is expected of you and your writing. So, for example, your teacher might ask for APA reference formatting or Harvard reference formatting. At university in the UK, if we're in a science or technical engineering sort of subject, we would use typically Harvard referencing, for example. So generally, like I said before, it includes authors' names, titles, publication information, and URLs if applicable. So entries are typically arranged alphabetically by the first author's surname, and every in-text citation must have a corresponding entry in the reference list. So the reference list provides the full details for the sources briefly cited and signposted in your main text. So in-text citations are required when, for example, you're paraphrasing. When you summarize or paraphrase someone else's ideas, you include the author's last name and year of publication in parentheses. For example, here's one on the screen. If you've used direct quotes, you've taken a quote, something that somebody has said or written, so you've used someone else's exact words, you would include the author's last name, the year of publication, and perhaps the page number if you've taken that out of a book, for example. Here's an example I'm showing on the screen now. If there's a case where you've got multiple authors, so two authors, you would include both the last names. But if you have three or more authors, you would usually include the first author's last name followed by a Latin abbreviation, et al. Here's two examples of that. The first example where there are two authors, I've got both surnames there, and then the date, the year, and the second example, Smith et al., showing that there's three or more authors for that paper. Et al., like I say, is Latin, it's an abbreviation, and it means in English and others. So it's used to shorten lists of authors where there are far too many authors to name in full. However, in your reference list, you do it slightly differently. So your reference list needs to be in alphabetical order by the first author's last name, and it would include the author's last name, their first initial or initials, and year of publication, like that example I'm showing. You'd put the title of the work, include the full title of the book or the article of the website. You'd capitalize only the first word of the title and any proper nouns. In some cases, in some formats, you'd italicize the title of books and journals. You'd also then include the publication information, depending on whether you've used a book, a journal article, or a website, for example. You would include different types of information as those examples on the screen are showing. So, here's some tips. Be consistent. As a teacher myself, as a university lecturer, I would far rather my students be consistent in their referencing and try their best to reference rather than not reference at all because you're worried about how to do it. So ensure that all entries in your reference list follow the same format. Don't get too hung up about which format initially, but do check with your teachers or the people who've asked you to do the writing, which format they would prefer you to use. So be consistent in terms of your font size for your entire document, including the reference list. Make sure it is all consistent and coherent. I would suggest double spacing your reference list, perhaps using a hanging indent for each entry in your reference list. Makes it really super clear. So Harvard referencing style may vary slightly also depending on the specific guidelines provided by your institutional publication. But like I say, I would, as an engineer working in a sort of science and engineering technology context, I would definitely use Harvard referencing in my work unless somebody's asked me not to. And always check the relevant style guide for your work. Check with your teacher, check with the editor that you're submitting your article for publication into. Whatever it is, do check it out. I hope